around and talked to players about joining our team, and nobody wanted to play with us. Everyone thought that we were on the losing end of this Western shuffle.
I know that you've had a very, very, very long career, especially in Dota, but starting in Han, moved to Dota. You've played on a lot of different teams. I think it was Stay Free, Super Strong Dinosaurs. I have my list here, so correct me if anything is wrong. Super Strong Dinosaurs into Sad Boys, which you guys had a massive win streak on that. Sad Boys was eventually turned into the EG roster. You guys were with EG for a while. I think it was third place at TI4, first in TI5, third place in TI6. Following that, again, if I'm not mistaken, you transitioned from being a player into, you were CEO of EG for a little while, and then you pulled back from that and you were kind of in like the post-player era where you started working on NADCL, a little bit of work with the Nouns, and I think that's correct mostly for the journey of your career so far. And it's very like broad and brief description, right?
You're close. Not perfectly spot on. And
what did I miss?
I left being CEO of EG because I wanted to go back to being a player. So I joined Optic Gaming in 2018, played at TI8 with them, and then I moved to Sweden and joined Ninjas in Pajamas and continued to play Dota for them and qualified to, we participated in TI9 there as well. And then COVID kind of happened, and that's when I really did take a step back and started my retirement, I guess you could say.
Gotcha. Okay. So what? That's actually, I'm curious on this point too. So you went to the CEO position, or you went into like the management side of esports, and then you came back to being a player. Was it just because like you missed the thrill or the competition or that drive of actually playing, or what was it that pulled you back into being like the player side of things and leaving the management side of things?
So I was actually invited to be an analyst, one of the main analysts on the desk at TI7, and I was just sitting up there, watching all of my peers compete for, millions of dollars in front of a stage and all these fans cheering them on, and I just missed it. Like I just felt like my playing career wasn't done. I didn't necessarily want to step back from being a player when it happened. It was more of a team decision, and I just kind of timing, placement. Just kind of ended up being the CEO. I don't think it was something that was on my list of things to do at that current time. It just kind of happened.
Cool, fair enough. I guess on the reverse of that, so you went from the CEO into going back into playing, but the original journey into something like Han, or I guess from Han into Dota, what was it that actually pushed you wanting to be a player in the first place? Is it just that you grew up as a gamer, or you were just like intensely competitive and that was where your competitive drive went into? But what actually drove you to wanting to go down the esport route?
Yeah, so definitely a gamer for life. I had a friend who lived in the neighborhood next to me. His dad built PCs as like a side hustle, and as a result, him and both of his brothers all had their own personal computer at their house. So they had like a 3 PC setup in like this tiny little bedroom. Whereas like I didn't even have my own PC at home. We had like a GameCube or an Xbox or, something like that like me and my friends would, play split screen on at home, which is very, very common in America. So I kind of had this unique access to the like hardcore PC gamer environment that not many people had here. And that led to me playing games that were, a little bit more mature than my age, and gave me like a really early start on Warcraft 3 especially. And that's kind of where I developed all of my like RTS skills, and I was able to transition that into a lot of, I played a ton of Dota 1, Warcraft 3 custom games, and then when Heroes of New Earth came out, I started playing that, and I was pretty obsessive about it. My friend who I played with, we always party queued. I was the position 5 support, he was the carry, and we were unstoppable. We were awesome. If people, this is a throwback for a lot of people, but there used to be EM mode, easy mode in Dota. Like you would always look at the custom games in Warcraft and you'd see AP, RD, all random, but sometimes they would have EM attached on the end. And you can think of that almost like the turbo mode of today, where it's like a quicker, faster, easier version of the game. People gave EM players a ton of shit, and so when me and my friends would join Dota lobbies that weren't easy mode, they were able to detect or like see that we were easy mode players, and they immediately like thought less of us. Like they would actually kick us from the lobbies even though we were the same like Dota rank / higher rank than them. But because we were EM players, all the Dota players were like super elitists and like non-EM maxis. So they would give us shit. And so, yeah, we kind of had like a little chip on our shoulder for a while, being these like EM players coming into the scene. Eventually, we kind of found ourselves playing in a couple of in-house leagues where we started to, meet other peers who were very, very competitive as well. Moved into... Yeah, and that's kind of where it all took off. We just stopped playing EM and started taking ourselves a little bit more seriously. This was like right at the end of high school, early college. My parents refused to send me away to college because they thought that I would just play video games and not actually take advantage of the tuition expenses that they would be paying. And so they made me stay home. So I quit gaming that year, got a girlfriend, started doing stuff outside. Convinced my mom, I think my dad he knew what was going to happen. I convinced my mom that I was over video games and that I was ready to go away to college and, do the whole American thing. And they sent me away to university for a semester where I subsequently stayed in my room and played video games 24/7. And that's actually when I became a Heroes of New Earth professional. I got to like a very high ranked in an in-house league, and another player, Swindle Melons, Kyle, invited me to join his team, which had Snake King on it, Way Too Sexy. There's a guy named TKO Lol and Tralfamador, which are some huge throwback names for people that have been around a while. And that was kind of the beginning.
So your parents were absolutely correct then. You got to the dorm and you started playing games nonstop.
Yes, and I only went for one semester because it wasn't really for me, and I really wasn't taking advantage of like the social and networking opportunities that university provides.
Yeah, fair enough. So, question that's unrelated to Dota completely, because you said you've always been a gamer. I'm just curious, like, what was your, maybe not your first game, but what was the most fondest game you remember growing up? I have, because like I asked this question because I have two games that are very, very locked into my brain from when I was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah, I played everything, honestly. Like, I played tons of Madden, I played tons of Smash Brothers, I played tons of Call of Duty. I have like these are all like, just every 6 months, right? Or every year it'd be like a new game, and maybe a couple would sort of, I'd still go back to a couple more frequently, but you name it, I've probably played it. Age of Empires, I think Warcraft 3 is probably the most, the most important game to me that I spent a ton of time on. World of Warcraft, spent way too much time on that game.
Same.
That's how it goes, though, right? Like, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I memorialized my two favorite games right here. It was the NES version of Mega Man 2 and Ninja Turtles. That was like, I remember like sneaking out at like midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning. Not sneaking out, but like leaving my room, going to find wherever the NES was locked up, and then like sneaking into the basement to play games for the rest of the night. Like that was core to my childhood.
Some of my most earliest like childhood memories of gaming were my dad got us an N64 for Christmas one year. This is the memory I always go to. We played just Mario 64, where you run around and collect all the stars. I was really young. We had a babysitter at the time, and she was actually insanely good at this game. So she would just come over and watch me and my younger... This is part of my story, too. I have a younger brother named Alex, who's 15 months younger than me. So we're just about like the same age. And so my entire life, I always had like somebody to compete up against in gaming. Like, we were always like, co-op or multiplayer versing each other. And my childhood home was kind of like the neighborhood hangout spot, so all of my friends would come over, and we'd frequently have 4 people to play a game together. Or when the technology got better, we were able to do like 4v4s and get like multiple TVs set up, and we threw a ton of LAN parties in my basement.
I missed LAN parties. For me, I like this question, even though it's not really related to Dota at all, is one of the things I find most fascinating, because everybody has like a little bit of a different origin story when they come into gaming, but there's like themes that are very similar between all people. And for me, you had a brother that was 15 months younger. I was born to a fairly large extended family, but I was like 10 years behind all of my cousins. And so as I was growing up, I was watching them do the LAN parties for, what was it, N64, the James Bond one, Golden Gun?
GoldenEye,
I'd
yep.
watch them play. I wasn't allowed to play because it was a shooter. I'd watch them do the LAN parties of Halo. By the time Halo came around, I was starting to be allowed to play a little bit, but I was always watching them. And so I think my drive for games really was spawned from having to watch my cousins play nonstop, and I just always wanted to be part of that. And that just drove me forward within the space.
It's a huge advantage to be like around older people when you're young. Not like too much older, but like a little bit older, because you just get a head start, right? And also they're oftentimes better or just like higher skilled or more experienced, and it's much easier to catch up. Even in Dota today, right? Like somebody asks, Peter, how do I get better at the game? Play with people that are better than you. That's the fastest way to improve.
Yeah, I like that. So I like so with the play with people that are better than you. I have a thought that I can't prove. I have no idea if it actually works. I think it does, just by all theory crafting possible. But I'm curious what your thoughts on. So, if you want to get better, play with people who are better than you. Do you think the reverse is true, where if you are good at the game and say you're plateaued or you're having a hard idea or a hard time working through ideas or trying to figure out what the next step is, do you think there's any value in a pro player, somebody that wants to get better, finding somebody who's slightly worse than them and coaching them through the process just to solidify your own understanding and knowledge about the games? Or do you think that would be largely a waste of time?
I don't think you want to spend all your time doing that, but I do think that a great way to learn is to teach. It really kind of solidifies your knowledge and provides a lot of confidence, I believe. Like if you're willing to go out there and tell somebody that this is the way, like you're able to articulate, right? This is how I think that I do it, and this is how I think it can work. Our processes, they're very natural, right? A lot of times we don't even know our own processes or the reason why we're good at things. So kind of having that self-reflection, I think, is key for improvement.
Yeah, the idea that I have, or the reason I think that this is important, is because a lot of this doesn't just hold true for Dota, but for a lot of games, is that a lot of pros have a lot of implicit knowledge. So like the knowledge that they can't really explain, but they can do. So it's like whatever it might be within any game, but they can actually like produce a high performance or a really elite level performance within the game, but they have no idea how to break that down to the steps of how they actually execute that knowledge or that skill. And the idea behind this is like if you can coach somebody in it, you're taking that implicit knowledge where you can do but not understand and turning or creating understanding in it so that you can actually figure out where your own weak points are, because you actually now comprehend what your own knowledge is and where your gaps are. And I'm playing around with the idea because I think I've seen it work for some players. Some players it doesn't work, and I agree that it shouldn't be all the time. But if you're hitting that plateau state, just spending like an hour or two teaching somebody will really help to open up like, this is where my gaps are because I can now understand my knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's always good to be a mentor. It's always good to help the younger generation, right? There's a lot of, like as you said, like it could potentially help yourself, right? But there's nothing wrong with doing something a little bit selfless from time to time.
True, that's a good point. In the on the topic of practice and coaching and those types of things, I'm curious on what your thoughts are with, since you've been around since like the spawn of Dota, you've gone through all of the iterations, the variations of like Han and stuff like that. And you've gone through the years, you've been at TI, you've seen the way that Dota has changed over the years. Do you notice a difference in, say, like the culture, the mentality, or the approach to practice? So say like scrims in 2013 versus scrims in 2017, 2018, 2023. Do you see that players are maturing in their approach to actual development, or do you think it's largely stayed the same? Do you think that it's getting worse? I'm kind of curious on how you think people approach practice and training and just development as a whole now, or over the years.
Yeah, I mean, things have changed a lot. I think mostly just because of the popularity and the attention around the game. For the longest time, it was really like a really like close, tight-knit circle of high-level Dota players who just wanted to compete up against each other. That was like all of the in-house leagues that we play. These were leagues with 100 to 300 players, and we played against each other every day. So and that was kind of a necessity for us back then, whereas now matchmaking has sort of created this like much greater pool of players. I think the in-game playing experience has become a little bit less personal, right? And players are very, what's the word, like disposable or like replaceable. There's kind of like lack of connections, and I think now more than ever, we're very much like fragmented, especially like all across the different teams and different regions and different organizations, and people are just a little bit less collaborative than we were back in the day. Because I think there's definitely more of like, hey, we're all in it together sort of a thing, and now it's a lot more everybody trying to get as much as they can for themselves, I think.
Is that change because of like matchmaking or because of just like the sheer volume of money that's come into Dota? I know it's kind of starting to die off a little bit in terms of money, but like
A little
was
bit.
those prize pools starting to like put the divide between people because they all want to win, or is it just because the matchmaking caused people to be more self-focused rather than collaborative? I'm curious in like what caused that change.
I think the big change was matchmaking. I think the development of the internet, like, it's just been getting better and better and better, and I think matchmaking was a product of that. You know, we had the lobbies, right, the custom game lists, the basically bots that were creating matchmaking for us, and now it just became it just became so easy to sort of find a game, whereas back in the day you kind of had to find yourself a community first and then you had the game. So people aren't really getting into those communities; they're just playing the game.
Gotcha. Do you think the state of Dota would improve if people start getting back into the communities? Not so much like say the growth of Dota as a community, but the development of pros and getting higher skill, pushing limits more, learning metas, creating metas. Do you think that would start to get better if the community started to form again and like knowledge was shared, people were coming together? Or do you think like that would help the growth of Dota, but not necessarily the skill of Dota?
I think it would help both. And I think that's because you would have a better sort of path to pro environment for younger players. I think at the moment, the path to pro is like pretty nebulous. People kind of just like doom queue matchmaking until they're top ranked and they get, potentially noticed by a Division 1 or Division 2 team. If you start with the community aspect, I think those teams form much, much earlier on, and those kind of connections that you create with other players, right? Look at Gaming Gladiators, or I think Team Liquid with like Insania and Mickey and Boxy, right? Like those guys have been playing together for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years at this point, and they weren't always good, right? I'll tell you, like in Han, like those guys were not the best, right? They weren't even close, right? But you look at them now, right? Top of the food chain.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. What do you think if, and we're starting to see this in other games, like whether it's League, whether it's Valorant, maybe CS. I don't think it's actually happening in CS yet, but where Tier 1 teams are starting to put together secondary rosters so that the top team can be playing against the lower team, trialing different ideas or strategies. Do you think that has any place in Dota, or do you think that's largely like a waste of time or a resource sink that could be, the resource could be put elsewhere?
So if you're paying them like a monthly salary, yes, I would consider that a huge resource sink and a lot of overhead, just based on where esports is at the moment. I think that it can be helpful, but I think in Dota, I think the skill gap is just too large between like your Division 1 rosters and your potentially like academy teams. I think anybody that's worth practicing against for those top teams is somebody else that's on a Division 1 roster that's trying to, win TI as well. So it's, the skill gap in Dota, it goes up really quickly. Like, you go up against Gaming Gladiators, right? Those are not easy games to win, no matter who you are. So if you're a tier or a 2 tiers below them, that game is going to look pretty one-sided, I think. It's like, maybe you make it through laning phase, right? Maybe the game goes more than 20 minutes. But once you get to the mid-game and late game, like, the decision-making, the speed at which they play, it's you're not going to be ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, we even felt that a little bit at this past Dream League against Spirit. Spirit was very rapid decision-making and very decisive. That just
sometimes you show up to a match and you're just like, okay, they're better. They're better. And that's fine. Like, that's just how it is, right? And it doesn't, and the good players will shake it off, right? Like, you guys, Shopify, you guys just got second, right? I don't think many people saw that coming. I think a lot of people had sort of written you guys off a little bit. So the truth is, like, all these players on these top teams, like, they're all pretty close, and it really comes down to who prepares best and who shows up on any given day.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I think of, and again, this isn't just for Dota. This is for pretty much every game. Is I don't think of matches as necessarily in like a binary win or lose sense. I think of them as largely about like probability, and there's a lot of pieces that go into showing up on the given day, and it's who does all those things to increase the probability of showing up on that given day, and just
sure.
accepting the fact. I know it sounds kind of like doomish to say this, but accepting the fact that you just, no matter how good you are, you cannot win every game, but you can always, or you can't win every series even or anything, but you can be doing the things that give you the highest probability of showing up. And over the grand scheme of things, like, you can be consistent because like some games you win, some games you lose, but you have done the right probability choices all along the way. And that's the way I typically think about it.
There's very few teams that fit this mold, but like we lose 80 to 90% of the tournaments we compete in, right? And it's the 10%, right? That's what you play for. You know, you want to take home the trophy, you want to win the big prize, but losing is a majority of what we do. So if you're not making the most of it, you're going to get left way behind.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. On the note of like winning and losing, you've had a very long and successful career, I would say, across the board. And I'm curious on, you've talked a little bit about like how you got into it, but I'm curious also on like, once you got into it, what was it that set you apart or made you different from other people that allowed you to have consistent success, sometimes like first, sometimes not as good, but like that consistency over the years? What enabled you to do that, whereas other players might have had like a one-time showing and then fell off, or just never had those good showings? Like, what set you apart from other Dota players across the years?
All right, so yeah, I think I've got my own form of madness, my own form of craziness. I've always been somebody who's just performed better with a chip on my shoulder, right? Like, I take things personally, right? I get these grudges against other people and other players and other teams, and that motivates me more than anything. Like, it's not that I want to win the trophy and take home the money so I could buy the nice house or the car. It's like, I really just want to beat that other team so I could just go on Reddit or on Twitter or wherever and just see everybody talking about how much better I am than them or something like that. I know that's like,
no, I like it.
It feeds my ego for sure.
Sure.
But it does kind of help motivate me to continue being the best. And when I was with EG, you know, the most successful part of my career, when we got like second or third place at tournaments, it was like internal conflict. It was like, are we going to disband? Like, we were that mad. So yeah, it's just like a demand for excellence.
Cool. All right. So I'm curious about this, because for some people, when they have the chip on my shoulder anger approach, they just fall apart as a person. So when you get that chip on your shoulder, what is it that like ticks in your brain, or how does it push you forward without falling apart? Like, does it just drive you to play more pubs, focus on scrims more? Does it just like make you more dialed into matches like that? The anger fuels you to dial in? Because again, I've seen players who, once they get angry, they cannot engage with the game anymore. Like, it's just full on breakdown in terms of like their focus or their learning, all those things.
I don't know if anger is the right term for what I would call it. I think it's more like, what's the word? It's like grit almost, or
okay.
It's like
tenacity.
You know, tenacity, yeah. Like when I get, you know, when I'm in the mood where like I know I really want to win or I'm really motivated to do something, like that chip on the shoulder allows me to give it 110%. So I will I will prepare. I will make sure that we're all on the same page, right? I'll do all of the team stuff, right, to just put ourselves in the best position to win. And more often than not, right, those preparations, right, as you said, increasing the probability of your chance to win, you know, those odds favored us.
Gotcha. And in that process, did you ever, because one of the big concepts or topics in my world is the idea of burnout. With that, did you ever experience or have to fight through burnout, or was it just like nonstop motivation because that tenacity, the grit, the chip on the shoulder just gave you more fuel, and so you never did experience the burnout?
I think the only time I really had the burnout was at the end of my career with NIP. We had just qualified to the Los Angeles Major with a roster that nobody thought we could win with, and it wasn't easy. And then COVID happened, all of the live events were canceled, and I was thrown into, we lost Universe and Lelis, who were two of our players from USA and Brazil. So we had to play with like two stand-ins, which were Blizzy and Milan, for like some online ESL tournament. And yeah, we got destroyed, and I was just over it at that point. I need a break. I need to do something else. I can't just, I worked so hard to kind of achieve qualifying to that tournament, and to just walk away from it, right, and just start over with like all new people was just exhausting.
Gotcha. Okay, and so that was kind of like the final nail in the coffin. That's when you started looking at different types of careers within esports.
It was like the only nail in the coffin. I think I think I was very content with my situation up until that point, and I've always been somebody who's made like incredibly like rash life decisions on like a whim. So I just kind of, I don't know. I've always been curious about other stuff and doing other things. The grass is always greener on the other side. Like I didn't really know what was ahead of me. But yeah, I just kind of took a break and went for it.
Follow-up question to like what makes you different, or what sets you apart from everybody else? So again, the chip on the shoulder, the tenacity, that drive is definitely one thing. And admittedly, this is a little bit of outside my knowledge range, because up until SR had a Dota team, or until we picked up the Dota team, I was a little bit ignorant of the Dota scene as a whole, just because it wasn't a game that I played, and I wasn't in the community by and large. So this, again, is a little bit outside my wheelhouse. One of the things that I read and some of the things I checked up was that one of the things that set you apart as a player was your ability to draft. And I'm curious on like what your thoughts of that. Is that like how you feel that you had an exceptional ability to pick comps, pick heroes that were strong, and like the way you thought about compositions was different than other people, or do you not really see that as one of your strengths?
I definitely think that I had unique ideas and thought of clever ways to sort of get around problems or find ways to get easy wins, right? Like I love what you said about the probability to win and stuff, right? Like if I could win during the drafting phase, right? Like that's huge, right? Like to just get one win out of that best of 3 because of the draft, you're more likely going to win some tournaments if you can manage to do that a couple times. So I really just think I prepared well. I actually wrote things down and took notes and had documents that I used to help me make progress. Like even today, like a lot of players don't show up with anything more than like the other team's Dota buff, or any sort of, they don't talk with their teams about what they want to pick or draft, or, they don't prepare ahead of practice that week of like what they actually want to work on. And I just kind of did all those little things and made sure that, we took advantage of the time that we had together and didn't waste it. So I just think I looked at the game a little bit more professionally than other people did. And I think that just gave me a huge advantage. I've never been the highest skilled player, like, admit it, like, and now I'm like super washed. I'm not good, but I wanted to win. And so I just tried to contribute where I could.
Gotcha. Okay. So and you'll have to excuse me, I'm going to make some comparisons to League here, because I'm a lowly League player. So you'll have to bear with me. So when I think of drafting in League, a lot of the stuff that I would think about, or if I was a pro League coach, a lot of the stuff I think about is like the break points of champions, the at what level plus what items can we get a full clear and like one ability rotation, the thematics of a composition. Like we'll think about all of these things, and I think that's fairly standard in League. And I'm curious, like when you use the words like I like to solve the problems or something similar to that. You said looking to solve or create solutions to the problem at hand. When you think about the compositions and kind of like how I was just describing it or comparing it to League, what type of stuff were you looking for in heroes when you're trying to solve these problems? Is it just like the overall thematics of a composition? Is it the numbers behind the abilities? Is it the like the rotations that are currently possible within Dota? Like how did you actually, or what was the unique way that you would think about heroes and compositions to solve the problem?
Sure. So Dota heroes do change from time to time, right? With the patches and the updates and the talents and the neutral items, right? Like there's all these changes and stuff that come, but for the most part, every Dota hero has stayed somewhat consistent with their original skill base. And I like to think of every Dota hero as its own unique tool. And they all have their own counters, and they have their good matchups as well. So kind of putting all of those pieces together and turning it into like a cohesive plan is kind of the higher level strategy that I was able to bring to the table. A lot of players are primarily focused on their own specific roles, and you kind of, you do need somebody to sort of pull it all together. And like I said, like that's where I was able to kind of step in and put in the extra work to be the person that would pull together, the greater strategy in terms of drafting. So I still relied heavily on my teammates to understand like what was good. Whenever I join a team as a coach, or whenever I would join a team as like the new drafter, the first thing I would do is ask players, what are your 5 favorite heroes right now? Like, first off, who do you think is, maybe that's not fair. Like, who do you think are the 5 best heroes for your role in this patch? And then who are your 5 favorite heroes to play? Because it's not always the same. And you have to understand, like, who your teammates are, what they're good at, and then turn it into, like, a cohesive team plan that is hopefully good for the current patch.
Okay, so with the idea of, like, players having preferences, and I forgot to ask you this earlier, but do you think it is important for a coach or a captain or whoever might be calling the shots here, do you think it's important for them to consider the type of heroes a player wants to play, or do you think it's better for there to be an expectation that here is the 5 best heroes, or here's what fits the meta, you need to learn these 5, or like how much do you want to incorporate or consider their preferences?
Time is limited, right? So unfortunately, not everybody can be good at every hero, right? Like I have 400 Treant Protector games, right? It's my best hero. I don't have 400 Ancient Apparition games. I can't tell you as much about that hero as I can Treant. And that's the same for everybody. So you kind of have to lean on your strengths. I always looked for, in patches, you'll see like the best heroes are the ones that can fill multiple roles. Think like Monkey King playing position 4, right? But also being a mid, while also being an offlane, while also being a carry. It's like, once you find these are heroes that you... So when I have the top 5 lists of, what's good and what they like to play, I look for similarities amongst my teammates, right? So if I see Monkey King, my 4 position likes to play it, and my mid likes to play it, that means Monkey King can now be an earlier pick because it can be flexed to multiple roles. That's the kind of stuff where, like, if I see that same hero as, like, top 5 in its role for that current patch, and my carry doesn't play it, but my mid and my forward love to play it, I might say, hey, do you want to try playing this hero a little bit so we can, add to our strategy, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, try flex it, or... Okay, cool. I see the value in that. I flex picks, I know in League, again, sorry for the comparison here, but in League, like, flex picks are one of the highest priorities just because it's harder to counter pick and just opens up the map a little bit. I think I have one final question. We can probably start wrapping it up there, but this is a little bit about picking compositions and the meta, and I'm curious on what are your thoughts with regards to pro teams right now, or maybe in the past as well, but do you think teams are, what's the right word, uncreative, and they just follow the typical meta or what is considered to be the meta, or do you think teams are pretty good at being creative, at innovating, at coming up with new compositions, or do you think teams should be more creative, or do you think they should be just following the meta? What do you think, like, sets a team up for the best chances of success?
Yeah, it's tricky. I haven't been super plugged in terms of, like, Dota and strategy at the highest level, so if there's any pros listening, they're probably going to laugh at me.
I'll send it to Bulba right after.
Yeah, I don't want to, like, talk out of my my skill range or whatever, but I do think that I think the game has become a little bit more, what's the word, unoriginal. I think there's lack of ability to be creative, which sort of leads to people playing the meta, and I think a lot of these tournaments have large qualifier stages with like a round robin group stage, for example, where it's actually statistically probably the right move to play what you believe is the meta, rather than trying to be super creative and come up with these niche, like, hipster drafts. But as you progress into the playoffs, when you're up against those better teams who understand the meta just as well as you do, I think that's where you have to sort of push the boundaries and get creative to find that that extra 5% chance to win.
Gotcha.
Which you can do with good preparation and creativity.
Gotcha. Okay. There was I might have referenced this in a previous podcast where there was a poker player talking about perfect poker, or like the correct way to play poker, and they were describing that like if you want to get through these large group stages and the qualifiers, you should just play correct poker.
Exactly.
And it was a Daniel Negreanu that was talking about this. So it's like you just want to play that because it's going to max out your probability. But then he was talking about a young up and coming poker player who played and understood perfect poker, but when you get to those later stage tables, he started to do stuff that was counter to perfect poker just because it threw everybody through a loop and people didn't know how to respond properly to it. And so though he was playing incorrect poker, he was winning very, very consistently because he understood, I know poker doesn't call it this, but he understood the meta of poker enough that he could kind of like challenge what was normal about it.
Yeah,
when
that's
I
a
think
great
about
comparison.
when I think about games like Dota, League, and even to a certain degree Valorant and CSGO, is you need to have a very deep understanding of the meta and know how to perfect the meta. But once you have that, there's going to be times where you have to counter that or play against that just to have like that extra 5% like you were talking about.
And what if you're playing against a team that's better than you, right? You can't just play the meta versus them playing the meta, right? You've got to throw a wrench in there somewhere.
Do you think teams get scared? I know you said you were a little bit disconnected from the pro scene right now, but do you think players or pro players, from your experience, they get nervous about playing off meta because it puts their career at risk? Like if I pick this hipster off meta champion or a hero and then we lose because of it, my job is on the line, so I'm just going to stick to the meta to protect my future career. Do you think that's like
depends on the position that they're in? I think it comes down to like an individual case by case basis. I don't think that I was ever in a position like that, but that's usually because I had a lot of authority over my team, right? I was never worried about losing my spot on the roster if I, picked Ancient Apparition for the first time in ever, right? I think if you, if you have this idea where you want to play some Venomancer mid and it doesn't work, and somebody told you that probably wasn't the best idea, it's just going to be like a little internal conflict thing you guys are going to have to deal with. And I suppose it could lead to you losing your roster spot, but I would hope that top teams have a healthier dynamic than that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that at least I try to push with a lot of my rosters is like feel free. Actually, I encourage it to get creative and explore limitations, just because if you do come up with against teams that are better than you, you need some kind of advantage just to take, and not to be scared of what happens if we lose this. Actually, like be creative and explore these ideas. Master the meta for sure, but have the freedom to explore creativity and your own limitations as well.
Yes, Dota is our art, as I say. So get creative. True. And imagine, if you dream it, maybe it can become a reality. Somebody's got to come up with that new build,
True, very true, very true. But all right, Peter, I think we are coming up on time, so I appreciate your time. I appreciate all your insight. I love chatting with people who have a long history within different games, because there's just a perspective that you have that very few people share. So, again, appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to do it again whenever, and I'll see you at TI.
Are you going to be at TI?
Of course.
Beautiful.
Not working or anything, but I am doing some NADCL stuff. I don't know if you saw our Turbo Mode event that we're going to be hosting. Looking forward to that.
But tell me about it.
I'll send you a link. So there's a group called the Crimson Witnesses. They host basically third-party events at major Dota events. So, when the TI spectators were canceled in Romania and everybody had their flights booked, they were the ones that organized a setup with like a local movie theater to host a watch party for the games. They do like little bar crawls and different events and stuff at events all around the world, essentially. So I heard that they were hosting some events, and I was kind of getting back into Dota this year. After I was a caster at the Berlin Major, it's kind of, I got the Dota itch again. And so I just reached out and see what they were up to. They're kind of just hosting like a get-together party at the University of Washington's Recreation Center, which also features a 39 PC LAN cafe, essentially,
nice.
Amongst like a bowling alley and ping pong tables and a bunch of tables and stuff. So yeah, they're hosting an event. We're catering barbecue. It's got free beer and cider throughout the night. And then NADCL is going to come in and host a turbo mode tournament in that LAN center throughout the night. We're going to do a broadcast. I've got 8 team captains that are coming out. It's Universe, Sammy Boy, Zquix. He's like some YouTuber that people probably don't know. Speed. I haven't announced these yet, but Gunner, Yamson, and somebody else. MSS is coming as well, and these guys are all going to be the team captains, and they're going to lead teams full of spectators that bought tickets to attend the event through a tournament. And then we have a sponsor that's going to give away some prizes.
Cool. Send me some information, because I definitely want to come at very least watch that, because that'll be a lot of fun.
It's October 26th, so it's the Thursday before the finals. So it's kind of the appetizer, hopefully.
Okay, cool. I mean, if we do make finals, I probably will be pretty slammed with work. But if we don't make finals, I'm going to show up for sure.
That's that's how everyone is right now. It's especially when it comes to like teams, and I'm doing like influencer reach out to try and get some of these bigger Dota personalities involved. But everybody's a little nobody wants to commit because they hope that they're playing on Friday. But in the reality, that's not going to be the case, right? Half the teams are going to be eliminated at that point.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. But yeah, send me some information, and if I can, I'll definitely come. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it again, and we'll talk soon.